In this video, we're going to be sharing 3 steps to help improve shoulder health and strength for boxing. Hello everybody, welcome to Boxing Science. In this video, we're going to be sharing a very important subject, how to protect and improve shoulder health for boxing. Now, the upper limb and the shoulder complex are probably the most injured area for a boxer, excluding obviously the hands. So we're needing to try and protect this upper limb from injury. And the reason why the shoulders can end up being injured, you're feeling like some niggles, or even a lot of boxers end up getting shoulder surgeries. Boxers throw thousands of punches during a single training week. They're obviously in this tight guard position where the shoulders are elevated, throwing thousands of punches. Very anterior dominant sport, and this is really high forces, high repetition as well. You're going to get a lot of imbalance between the anterior shoulder complex and the posterior shoulder complex. Going to be imbalance actually between your lead shoulder and your rear shoulder. So most shoulder injuries actually happen in the lead shoulder. The main reason for this is because you're throwing your lead hand way more than your backhand. I actually estimated this to be anywhere between a 3 or 5 to 1 ratio when you're doing your training. But this sounds quite a lot. But if you think about like some of the combinations that you might throw, a double jab, right hand and a left hook, that's a 3 to 1 ratio there. And then you're thinking about the jabs in between or the lead hooks, constant use of this lead arm. You're often going to be using this lead shoulder a lot more than your rear shoulder. There's some data actually used from the Bivol versus Biev fight, the first one that took place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in October 2024. Both fighters actually used their lead hand between 75 and 80% of the time versus either use the backhand. That's around about a 3 to 1 ratio, and you're more likely in your drills to use that lead hand a lot more. So this means that we need to really focus on the shoulder health for the lead hand. Obviously the lead hand as well is used in a very different way. So we're using the jab, it's very much an arm punch. When we're using a hook, there's a little rotation there. With the backhand using way more rotation, whether you're throwing a straight hand or whether you're throwing a hook. So there's more use of the shoulder on the lead hand in volume and also in action as well. So we're talking about these imbalances from a technical perspective, but actually from an activity perspective, this is even more so, between how often a boxer does boxing training compared to how often they do their mobility and their strength training. How late did they actually introduce strength and conditioning into their routines? Let's say a junior boxer, let's say from 14 or 15 years old, they might have started boxing when they were like 6, 7 or 8 years old. So actually they're starting strength and conditioning quite late compared to their boxing training. A lot of boxers only start doing strength and conditioning when they get into a youth or maybe like a senior level, or maybe when they have more time on their hands, more finances available to be able to invest into their strength and conditioning. So when I've got a fighter 18 or 20 years old, still seems quite young to do strength and conditioning, but we've got to undo a lot of training history where they're throwing thousands of punches, got this large ratio without doing enough mobility and strength exercises. So this is creating a large imbalance between the demands of the sport and the amount of strength conditioning that they're doing. So this makes it vital that we put in these important steps in to help protect the shoulder from injuries. And this is done in 3 simple steps: mobilize, stabilize, and strengthen. And this is what we're going to be covering in this video. So step number 1 is mobilize, so improving mobility of the shoulder. At Boxing Science, we use the overhead squat assessment to test a boxer's ability to move. And this is testing their hip mobility, core stability, but also their overhead mobility. And what we found with most boxers that they struggle with overhead range. So we've tested over 160 youth boxers, over 66% exhibited limited overhead range. So this is a very significant finding. So there's a very large probability that most boxers have tight shoulders and they struggle with that overhead range. This means that we have to adapt a lot of our strength training methods around this. Also look to improve shoulder mobility. And we can do this in a range of different ways. We can look to improve overhead shoulder mobility. We can do this with floor slides, wall touches, and looking to just generally open up that chest area. Another key area that we need to work on is the thoracic part of the spine, because boxers are often in this position, that's quite tight in this position here, often quite rounded as well. So this is affecting thoracic extension. The thoracic part of your spine is towards the middle, towards the top, just underneath the neck part of your spine. And we're needing to try and improve that extension, so we can do stuff like quadruped prayers. We can do thoracic extension on a foam roller to try and help improve postural stability. Opening up these shoulders is really important because thoracic extension also links with thoracic rotation. So that's the amount of rotation that you can get through the upper part of the spine. And when this is restricted, this is where boxers can end up overcompensating using lower back muscles or leaning over that front foot. So actually, this is really important to help improve a boxer's ability to punch, not only to try and protect the shoulders. So we're actually trying to improve thoracic rotation. We can do this with seated rotations, eagles, windmills, kneeling rotations as well. And this is really mobilizing that shoulder joint. So not only looking at that overhead range, but also looking at thoracic extension and thoracic rotation. So to start implementing some of these mobility exercises, what we'll do is do the boxing science warm-up that we do every single session: eagles, windmills, and floor slides. This is ticking a lot of boxes in terms of improving your shoulder mobility. But if you're somebody that is struggling with your shoulder mobility, or you've got an injury around this area, start implementing some of these extra ones here. Working on your thoracic extension, overhead range, and also working on thoracic rotation as well. Putting this as part of your active recovery sessions, adding 2 or 3 of these exercises can start really helping improve that shoulder mobility. Tip number 2 is to improve stability around the shoulder. So shoulder stability is really important because when you throw a punch, you're wanting to try and create that shoulder stability when actually coming into contact with your opponent, with the pads, with the bags, or missing a shot in sparring. Shoulder stability is really important. The more instability around this shoulder joint, the more movement and the more injuries that can occur, whether it's at the shoulder or whether it's at the elbow. So we're needing to create that stability and create that in a very high force and high speed action. We'll start off with some really basic drills, such as like a plank row, shoulder tap, integrating the core with the posterior shoulder, but then also start challenging that movement as well. So doing some lateral walks, some lateral band walks, banded wall touches, which is really good for helping that stability. And then you could start doing some more dynamic exercises, such as the Swiss ball, figure of 8. You could also do a bottoms up press. This is really challenging the stability around the shoulder, especially in an overhead position. Then you can start challenging that shoulder stability through high force, high speed, but also in a boxing specific stance. So doing stuff like med ball throws, banded punches, landmine punch throws. This is creating that stability at the end. We're getting our athletes to obviously transfer the weight, transfer force through ballistic action, but we're also coaching them to be able to hold that stability after they've thrown the punch. We're actually getting them to finish in a really strong position and create that deceleration and keep that shoulder blade in place. Punch specific exercises, even though they don't look like shoulder stability exercises, they can help create stability through high forces and high speeds, and that's really important. End of the day, the stability needs to be created through high forces and high speeds, the demands of the sport. So we can try and get there through doing the punch specific actions. We're bridging the gap between the stability exercises that are really controlled through to really uncontrolled actions that you get during boxing and sparring. So step number 3 would to be strengthen the shoulder. So obviously strength training has a huge impact on injury prevention and helping reduce the likelihood of injury. So we need to strengthen the shoulder complex, but also there's a lot of limitations when incorporating pressing exercises, in particular overhead pressing exercises. We know from the research that boxers struggle with this overhead range. As soon as that overhead range is compromised, they look to compensate using that lower back. So pressing overhead might be quite limited. So we need to be able to get stronger without compromising that shoulder joint, without looking to compensate by using the lower back. That's why we use the landmine to help strengthen the shoulder muscles, because we're getting the benefits of an overhead press without compromising that shoulder joint or looking to compensate using lower back. Because of the angle of the landmine, we're still getting the adaptations that we need without compromising the shoulder joint or compensating using lower back muscles. And we often do this in a half kneeling position to restrict any lower body or trunk involvement, keeping the rib cage down, core nice and tight, and we're not looking to compensate twisting the torso or side bending. Really isolating that pressing action, utilizing the shoulder, the posterior shoulder muscles, and also the tricep muscles as well. We look to then try and progress this with standing variations, progressing towards like a kneeling dumbbell variation as well. If we are going to press overhead, we would do it from a seated position, either with a back support or without that support there as well. So we're looking to strengthen the shoulders without looking for them compensatory patterns. So adding to the pressing exercises, I would actually look to incorporate some pulling exercises, looking to focus on the posterior shoulder complex. So working those rotator cuff muscles. And the reason why is because the more strength that we have in the posterior shoulder complex will help pull the shoulders back, will help create some deceleration and some stability during them high force and high speed punching actions. I will look to do at least one posterior shoulder exercise per workout, doing 8 to 12 repetitions and 3 to 4 sets on this. And there's a range of different exercises that we can do. The main exercise that I would look to do is some sort of T-raise or reverse fly. We can do this in a range of different ways, whether it's a band pull apart, prone, reverse fly, doing it on the cables. But then also what's really important is doing it single arm as well. We can do the single arm banded reverse fly, or we can do it on a cable machine as well. Can then challenge our external rotation strength. Primarily we do this in an isometric fashion, whether it's a side lying isometric hold or a wall isometric hold. We look to do between 6 and 10 second holds on this, and we're looking between 5 and 10 repetitions on each side. And these exercises are taken from the framework provided by Athletic Shoulder, taking a lot of information from there. So go and check out Ben's work at Athletic Shoulder on his Instagram. And then you've got different exercises such as like banded face pulls, single arm banded face pulls and everything like that. Everything to just kind of work on that posterior shoulder. Sometimes we go really specific on working like on internal rotation as well, whether that's from an overhead position or from a prone position working down. And this is all dependent on how an athlete's shoulder is presenting due to our like more advanced shoulder screening. But from a general point of view, if you're watching this and you're struggling with that shoulder, literally look to try and incorporate at least one of these posterior shoulder exercises into your program, help improve the strength of your rotator cuff muscles, create more strength and stability around the shoulder complex that can help reduce the likelihood of shoulder injury or shoulder pain in boxing. Okay guys, so that brings us to the end of this video. 3 simple steps to help improve your shoulder health and strength: mobilize, stabilize, and strengthen. Hopefully you've taken a lot from it and it helps you reduce that pain or injury around that shoulder complex. Hopefully see you on the next video.